Hey, everybody, welcome to Monday Night Live. This is Kathryn Kauffman. I'm a psychic medium here in Lexington, Kentucky. And this is your preview for the Winter Christmas Ghost Stories 2025. Let me make sure that the chat window is up. There we go. And we'll just relax as people hop onto the stream. I wanted to be able to get some local ghost stories. So we have ghost stories of the Cumberland and haunted houses and family ghost stories of Kentucky. So these I found some really good local legends in. And I found another one that just gives a history of Christmas lore, and it's a little gory, so I thought you might like that tonight. And so it's been a couple years since I've done the ghost stories, and this is a tradition that goes back to as far as 1800, early 1900s. And back when electricity wasn't in every home, they would gather around either a fireplace or some lit candles, and it was tradition to tell ghost stories at Christmas time. Hey to Daniel, my brother, thanks for tuning in, and Ina, hi, how are you? But this was a big tradition and kind of fell by the wayside as technology has taken over, and now we watch Christmas ghost stories. And so it's more to watch on TV instead of listen to a recitation. But sometimes I think it's a little bit more relaxing if you just lean back in your chair, grab hot cocoa or a hot cider, or for me, a gin and tonic that David fixed, and just kind of listen to the ghost stories as I recite them. Gotta wet my whistle before we start. So to start, we're starting with Ghosts Along the Cumberland, and this was written by William Linwood Montell. If you like some of the stories in it, you might want to get a copy of the book. What we're going to start with now, that I gotta explain to you. The lights are down. I have mood lighting in the back, and I only have partial vision in my right eye, so you're going to have to really be patient as we go through these. This one I thought was really cool. Ghosts Enter House Carrying Casket. Well, it's been something like 30 years ago, I guess, here in Greene County, about 2 or 3 miles from Greenburg, an old house that was known as Old Blakeman Place. A family by the name of Edwards, so it happens, were living there as tenants of this place. And one night, as they were eating supper, the best I can remember it, they were at the table and they all ran out of the house frightened to death and went to a neighbor's and wouldn't go back in the house. And then they said that in the midst of sitting there in the Edwards place, that people came in. I don't know how many people, whether there were 1 or 2, but evidently appeared to them like ghostly apparitions of some kind, came into the house carrying a casket. So they just left the home, and of course the story spread like wildfire all over the town, and it became the chief pastime of all the residents around here to go out to the old Edwards place and see if they could see the ghosts. Everybody in the town just took it time about and went all over the house, and there was the table with the dishes on it still as they left them as they got up. remains of food and everything else was just sitting there. Of course, we didn't find any ghosts, but that might have even a bunch of the high school kids could get in cars. That was real fun, to drive out to that old Edwards house, and we'd park our car around there by the side of the house and watch to see if we could see anything. And of course, we imagined nearly everything: the moon shining, the trees moving. Say, oh, look, I see something. And a number of people claim that they did see things. I never did see anything anywhere except just movements in the trees. It was just fun to scare yourself to death. 3 additional fragmented legends told by an informant born in 1944 are distinctly related to both theme and structure to the accounts given by the person previous. Once upon a time, a young girl was sitting on the stairway of her home. Suddenly, she looked up, and 2 men with no heads were carrying a coffin down the steps. They went on past her without saying a word. She followed them out the door and went as far as the gate. But when they got to the gate, they vanished into thin air. So these are kind of renditions of the original story. Hey to Deborah and Melissa, Magical Monday indeed. Let's go on to another story. This is about, let's see, I picked another one back here that was really good. The Fiery Wheel. Well, one time when I was just a boy, I was dodging the law to get out of going to grand jury. Dad studies out at a place that I go to for we foreknown the sheriff and was a hunting the whole neighborhood, a getting all he could go before going to the grand jury. So he says, Billy, if you will go over to the old man Davidson's, you can stay over there and nobody won't know old man Elementalers. I can't remember, but anyway, I went to Uncle Jim Emmentaler's. That's the name, Emmentaler's. And Uncle Jim was glad that I had come. I said, well, I'll go and get some wood. Uncle Jim said, we'll have a good fire. And he was cooking a big hen looking for old man John Davidson's place. He had it under mortgage and he couldn't get any money. So they was both old and I built them a good fire. And long after supper, why, Uncle Jim and John Davidson got into a little argument. Imagine that, over money. And he thought that Uncle Jim had the money. And Uncle Jim told him that he had it, but he had loaned it out to different ones, and he probably couldn't let him have any more. And they got into a big argument and about trouble there. Uncle Jim sort of made a pass to get his gun. Then later on, the racket started, and he fixed pretty soon for me to have a bed, but was in different rooms I hadn't slept in. It was a different room that the boy hadn't slept in. Then later on, the racket started. I don't guess a year, he said. Would you sleep up in Uncle John Davidson's? No, I said. I'd rather sleep by myself, for he been in trouble and in jail, and I'd just rather have a bed to myself. So after we went to bed, Uncle Jim barred the door where I went in at. There's no place to get out and only to go out the back door. And he had to get a lot of things moved before I could ever make it out that way. I got scared in the night. The lights was flaming over Davidson's bed and streaked lights across the bed. And I said, well, can't you see them lights? He said, Billy, don't get scared. The sheriff's not going to come after you tonight. And I said, I ain't scared. I just don't like them lights crossing the bed. About that time, I made my way and pulled down a big dogwood fork, and that forked up in the door to hold the door where I went out at. I said, well, I'm making it out of here now, and about that time the old door fell, and I crawled out from under it and made my way on out. And I said, in the time of I forgot my hat or my cap, one, and says, would you pitch me my cap? And he said, yeah. Well, through the old orchard of Uncle Jim's, I saw the awfulest big wheel of just nothing, just rolling, just great big, well, as a barrel, and was coming from that wheel, just spinning like a place till you could see all the way back to the shepherd's place. I made a guess was 7 or 8 rails high, and I just kept running. So he didn't get caught by the cops, but he got caught by that wheel and the light that tore the door down. Let's have a little sip. Let's go on to haunted houses and family ghost stories of Kentucky. This is written by a person by the name of Montel. And all it says is Montel on the spine. Imagine I can find it on the inside here. William Linwood Montel. Okay, let's see how your ghost stories are. Page 38. An ancestor ghost annually reenacts his death. This house on Carlton Trace had been in the family for a number of years, and now my own immediate family was moving in. It was a beautiful 3-story Victorian house, and I was very excited about the thought of moving in. Grandma and Grandpa had lived there previously, but now they were both passed on, and the house was available for my parents and me. Just looking at the house always makes me think it was haunted. And because of this, I was truly scared of the thought of sleeping in my own bedroom there. Well, after we moved in one night, when the autumn mist was rolling in, I was awakened by a loud, obnoxious sound coming from the inside of the closet. Then, slowly, my closet door opened, and a white figure appeared and then vanished from my sight. I ran out of my room. I went into my parents' room and fell asleep with them. The following night, I was awakened by the same sound, except this time it was coming from the bathroom. I got out of the bed slowly and walked towards the bathroom door. When I got to the door, I reached for the doorknob and it began turning on its own. The handle was turning, but the door was being held in a closed position by some strong force. Again, I ran to my parents' room and I woke my mom. She walked down to the bathroom, and the same thing happened to her. She looked at me and said they would have to take care of it in the morning. I had just faded off to sleep when I heard the sound again, followed by a loud crash. This time, Mom heard it too. The two of us got up and started walking downstairs. Much to our surprise, silverware was flying around in the kitchen, and our 2 St. Bernard dogs were pacing the floor. We walked to the kitchen and looked in, and suddenly all the silverware fell to the floor. We picked it up and returned to bed. The next morning, we went to the bathroom and found all of the stuff in the medicine cabinet laying in the sink or on the floor. When we walked down to the kitchen, we found all of the silverware on the kitchen floor. We could not figure out exactly what was going on. It was just a bizarre situation. Our dogs, Bandit and Brandy, began barking to let us know they wanted to go outside. I walked to the front door to let them out, but they would not pass the pantry there in the entrance hall. I walked over and began pulling on the dogs, but they still would not budge. I asked my dad, "What's wrong with them?" But he didn't answer. The next afternoon, my mother and I walked to Uncle Steve's and learned every disturbing fact about that old house. Back about 1912, a young man shot and killed my great-great-grandpa. That took place right beside the hall pantry. Uncle Steve said the scent of death might still be there and that the dogs were smelling it. See, they have a sense of smell that human beings don't have. A few months later, and nothing else strange happened except that the dogs would never go past the pantry. Then, at midnight on January 21st, 1977, I was awakened by a loud cry for help, followed by a gunshot. I ran to the bottom of the stairs and saw both dogs laying side by side in front of the pantry, and in front of the dogs was a pool of blood. I woke up both of my parents, but they could not figure out where the blood came from. That afternoon, Uncle Steve came over and we talked to him about what had happened. And this is what we found out. Great-great-grandpa was killed on January 21st, 1912, and every year he relives his death. He also lives in our other house and does anything he wants, when he wants, how he wants. Within a few months, my family sold the old house and moved back to Crestwood. On January 21st, 1987, at midnight, the house on Carlton Trace burned to the ground, and within a matter of minutes. That happened exactly 75 years after great-great-grandpa was shot and killed. Maybe the person who lived in the house was the killer. Who knows? And great-great-grandpa was taking his revenge. All members of our family who are living in the house at the time it was burned were killed by the flames. Oh my gosh. That is a ghost story and a half, man. I'm telling you. Well, I'm just gazing up to see if there are any questions. Hey to Shannon, Pate Miller, and Deborah Hoskins. Pep Santa could read a final story of your choice. Cold read. Absolutely, Pep, if you would like to read a story. I'm going to read one more, and then if Pep wants to read a story, I'll let him read a story or recite a story, if he will. This next one is called A Haunted Cellar, and it is in Allen County. And I forgot to tell you on that last story, that was from Jefferson County, Kentucky. And this haunted cellar is from Allen County, Kentucky. Before the outbreak of the Civil War, there were a few families in Allen County that owned slaves. One of these families owned 13 to 15 slaves, and they were all kept in a slave house behind the main house. Although all the slaves lived in these quarters, there was a cellar in which the few slaves that were thought to need discipline were kept. There were shackles on the walls, and slaves might have been kept chained to the cellar for as long as 3 to 4 days in order to restore their usefulness. Since the man who owned these slaves was possessed of a very violent nature, no one said anything to him about the cruel way which he treated these people. About that time, Lincoln's War began, and the news spread around the county that the slaves began to make plans to run away since they knew they would never be released voluntarily. One night, they ran away and escaped, except the two that were in the cellar at the time. The others fled north and were eventually helped to complete safety by people with anti-slavery sentiments. Their owner in Allen County searched for them for about 2 days with no success, and he finally returned home. He was determined to carry out his vengeance on the other two that had remained chained to the cellar wall. His wife pleaded with him to let them go, but he refused and he shot them both. After his fit of anger had passed, he became frightened because of what he had done. He buried the two bodies of the people in the cellar. He locked the door to the cellar and even boarded up the door. Shortly afterwards, he joined the Confederate Army and was in the course of war. He was killed. His widow never reopened the cellar, and the few people who came to visit her reported that she went out of her way going near this particular door, and though it was located in a very centralized position of the house, she would never go near it. After a while, she became sick and died of lengthy illness. The house was sold by the nearest kin and family from neighboring Barron County, and it seems that this family was not well acquainted with the house's history. They cleaned up everything, brought all their furniture in, and reopened the cellar door. The cellar had a strange, musty smell with no amount of ventilation. After a time, the two children of the family told their parents they had heard strange noises at night that came from the cellar. The parents, of course, considered this only a product of the children's imagination. One night that summer, their mother woke in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. She could not account for this weird feeling, and suddenly she noticed that her husband was also awake. Both of them agreed that they had heard strange noises from the general direction of the cellar. The husband got up and headed toward the cellar to investigate, while his wife stayed in the bed. No one was ever certain exactly what happened, but the wife heard a cry and then a noise. She got up out of bed and went down to the cellar, where she found her husband dead. He apparently had tripped on the top stair and fell into the cellar and broke his neck in the process. After he was buried, his wife and children moved back to live with her own family in Barron County. She sold the house after quite a while at a great loss to a family that had moved here from Tennessee. And after a while, they too insisted that they kept hearing strange noises in the house. Although nothing drastic happened to this family, they soon moved out and the house was never sold again. Nobody would buy that place. Now only the foundation stones and a part of the cellar are all that's left of this house. Until this day, people who are brave enough to venture out at night to that spot insist that they hear strange noises and smell an unusual musty smell in the area of the old cellar. Oh, that's scary. That is scary. And to have the guy die. Okay, Pet. Let's see if Pet will come in and tell us a story. And he says yes. Pet could read a final story of your choice. Cole read. Perfect. We'll have Pep read Children's Ghost Tale. And this is Hardin County. Oh, I hear him coming.
Ho, ho,
Ho, ho.
Merry Christmas to you. I couldn't find my Santa cap, so I have my
Cowboy
hat
hat
on,
will do.
and I'm going to be free-range pet Santa and read you a story.
All right, this one is Children's Ghost Tale, Hardin County, and it goes from there all the way to there.
Okay.
I'm going to let you have the seat while I sip on my gin.
All right.
There you go. Let's talk into the mic.
All right. So
set your drink there.
Set my drink here. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show. I kind of just invited myself on to read a story. So here we go. Children's Ghost Tale, Hardin County. Once there was this great, big, old colonial-style mansion that was located out in the country. It was made of stone, and this family that had lived there, all of them died or had moved away. Finally, a family by the name of Tucker moved in. They had a little boy. Every day he would go to the kitchen and he would cry when he saw that the cellar door was open. He screamed and cried until they shut it. So every time they went to the kitchen, they had to make sure that the cellar door was closed so that Danny wouldn't start screaming and crying. See, back in them days, cellar was located under the house right next to the kitchen. Well, soon the little boy was old enough to go to school, so they took him to a psychiatrist. They told him that ever since the little boy was almost a baby, he was afraid to walk around by himself, that he was afraid the cellar door would open again. They had told him many, many times that they had to put things in the cellar and that they had never found anything wrong with it. So the psychiatrist said, "Let me talk to Danny alone." Well, he was talking to Danny alone, and he asked Danny what he thought was in the cellar. Danny said to him, "I don't know, but I think it's something bad." He said, "All right, Danny, that's all I wanted to ask you." So the doctor fellow called the boy's parents back in, told them to leave the boy in the cellar for at least an hour with the light on and the cellar door open. They agreed to do that, and so a week or so went by before they did it. In the meantime, the doctor told another doctor about it. The other doctor told him, "You better not do that, because it may destroy the child. It may kill him because of the fright." So the doctor rushed over, but they had already put Danny in the thing, and they didn't hear a thing out of the boy. They didn't know it, but the boy had been screaming and crying for a little while, then he stopped. When the doctor and the boy's parents got into the cellar, they found him on the floor. He had fallen off from where he was sitting. When his mother looked at him, she started screaming. The doctor looked at him, and he also yelled out a little, and the father started to cry. What they seen was Danny laying there on the floor, all chopped up and everything. He was dead. And the cellar door was wide open. They could see the blood tracks on the cellar steps where something had walked. Well, the doctor says I had no part in this. I didn't say that you had to do it. The mother and the father just kept on crying. The mother kept on hollering, "Danny, Danny." The parents never went down into the cellar after that. They soon sold the house and moved away, but before they left, they closed up the cellar for good. They didn't want anybody to be hurt like Danny was. Now, that's a scary tale, whether you're a ghost or not, partner. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all. From our hearts, we love everyone out there. And just brings joy to our hearts that you come to the shows. And I think I love that woman like nothing else in this world. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was fun. I love it. There you go. You're back.
I had picked that story because my older brother was visiting and his name is Danny. So I didn't want him to have loss of sleep tonight, but that is a really good tale. I'll look for a really short one here to close out with. Whistling sounds. My mother told that back in the 1920s, she had older brothers and one brother was married and had 3 children. They had just moved from Fayette County back to their home in Nicholasville County. They hadn't put everything away, they just sort of moved some things into the back porch behind the door. Well, one Sunday they heard a whistling sound coming from behind this door that went to the back porch. They moved things and closely inspected the door. Later, they opened the door and rearranged things to try to stop this whistling. There was no wind blowing, though, nothing. But there was this constant whistling. Later in the day, one of the little nephews got very ill, and they found out by questioning this child that he had gotten into some of the rat poisoning that had been stored in those things that hadn't been put away. Mother told me that back at that time, rat poison came in containers like toothpaste tube, and he had eaten some of this rat poison, and eventually the child died. When he died, the whistling went away. They never heard it again. So the whistling was sort of taunting the child towards this rat poison that he eventually ate and passed away from. Now, one thing I want to go into before we end, there is this book called Scary Book of Christmas Lore, and it's by Tim Rayburn, and he goes into a lot of scary Christmas stuff from different countries. And I think this country was Bavaria. I'm not sure. It's called Frau Perchtha. Frau Perchtha, or simply Perchtha, is a bit of a mystery. Some suggest that she was once a goddess in pagan Germanic times, one that people viewed favorably. She might be a version or a variation of any number of other Germanic goddesses whose legends spread throughout Germany and beyond as a guardian spirit of some kind. She first is mentioned disapprovingly around the year 1200 and might have been a figure that was still venerated or placated in some ways, but as often happened, the church was not thrilled with the idea of reverence of a rival spirit, much less a god, and probably set about blackening her name until such time as she was taken down a peg or two and made into a fearsome winter witch, accompanied by, of course, demons and other creatures of darkness. Oh, and she also has a charming nickname, the Belly Slitter. A few centuries later, we find the words Perchten and Perchtofen referring to ceremonies or processes in the Tyrol area of Austria that featured some of the demons and ghosts that were come to associate with these holiday time monster mashes at these holidays. In legends, they were demons and ghosts that roamed the night skies, and the demon named Percht seems to have been the Krampus-like figure. Did Perchta give her name to these celebrations? Quite possibly. The twists and tangles of the history of these mysterious beings are confusing and probably never will be unraveled. But at some point, Frau Perchta became another one of those creatures that haunts the night. She came to resemble the classic stereotype of an old crone or witch, dressed in rags, holding a cane, and old and wrinkly, but also sometimes having a beaked nose made out of iron. Oof, that sounds awful. She would then carry a knife or other dangerous weapon with her. She loved spinning, which gave her an association with the old Germanic Norse gods Frigg, and keeping things tidy. According to the legend, wool or flax had to be spun and ready to weave by January 6th. And for those who didn't have it ready, there would be some nasty surprise in store. She might visit the house and set fire to any fiber not yet spun. Worse, the householders had better have tidied up and left out a bowl of porridge for her. But if someone scoffs at this or forgets the oatmeal, old Frau Perchta would fly into a rage, burst into the bedroom, disembowel the offender, and fill their empty abdomen cavity with the straw and rocks that they deserved. When she's not busy ripping guts out of lazy housekeepers, she is sometimes said to ride the wild hunt, accompanied by the Perchthen, more on them later. The sounds of winds and thunder are their noise, not anything as mundane as the natural elements. While Krampus focuses his evil on the early part of December, Frau Perchta prefers the Thursdays before Christmas and the whole entire January, which is one way to tell them apart. Well, that is the whole disemboweling thing, but maybe Krampus is into that too. Who knows? I wish you guys a very happy Christmas and Happy New Year. And thanks for joining in the ghost stories. And if you'd like to share the ghost stories with someone you think might enjoy listening to a few yarns being told at Christmas time, share the video with them and make their Christmas a little more zesty. Kisses from Kentucky, and I will see you guys in the new year. I might hop on during Christmas just for a funsy, but I'll see you guys later. Thanks for coming and being with us. We really enjoyed it. This is a lot of fun. Bye.